Today, we're taking a look at the NBA Summer League grade for the Chicago Bulls. And so before we go ahead and we jump into it, I first want to remind you to slam dunk on that subscribe button, just like Modest Bazelis slam dunks in games, because in exchange for slamming on that subscribe button, I'm going to give you nothing but daily content around the Chicago Bulls. And so make sure that you hit that like, you hit that subscribe, and you join the Chicago Bulls Insider family as we talk nothing but Chicago Bulls basketball. And so with that being said, let's go ahead and let's jump into it as we're taking a look at the overall grade for the Chicago Bulls now that the NBA Summer League is over. And so we're going to first take a look at the things that went well for the Chicago Bulls. We're going to take a look at the things that did not go so well, and we're going to give it an overall grade for the NBA Summer League. And so let's go ahead and start with the things that went well. And so starting with the top of the franchise, and that's going to start with Bryson Graham. And so look, I think that this was a success during the NBA Summer League because Bryson Graham, he was there at the NBA Summer League. And so he was over there with Tiago Splitter taking a look at the players. And so I love seeing that because that just shows the type of involvement that he has with just getting this roster in the right direction. And so you love to see him there evaluating the talent. And then number two, the next thing that sticks out, I think, with Bryson Graham being at the NBA Summer League is just going back to what Caleb Wilson said when he asked about wanting to play some more. And so he talked about reaching out to Bryson Graham, and Bryson Graham gave him the okay. And so you just love to hear that. The fact that the communication is clearly there, the fact that Caleb Wilson, look, he picks up the phone and he talks to Bryson Graham like that. And so you love that. And I think that that is exactly what you want to see with this new front office. This kind of goes into what we talked about in the last video with really the dysfunction as far as the direction and the communication and everything else. And so I think that that was fully on display with Bryson Graham being at the NBA Summer League. And so I think that that was certainly a positive here for the Chicago Bulls. Next, Tiago Splitter. And so with Tiago Splitter, he coached in 2 games. I know he went 0-2 for the Chicago Bulls in those games. But what I liked about with what Tiago Splitter did in those games is that he clearly established what he wanted in those games, because I like the fact that, look, he went ahead, he made the adjustment with Noa Essengue. He was not afraid to talk about why he made that adjustment, wanting to see more from him and everything else. And so I love the fact that he is holding players accountable. And then also, too, you know, when you go back to his first press conference there after the game where Caleb Wilson has the 35 points, he was like, look, yes, he was, you know, on one that game, but he was like, look, we still need to move the basketball and everything else. And so I love the fact that, look, he is stating these truths and just not holding anything back, because if you want to get to the best with this roster, you're going to have to, you know, say the things that really need to get done. And so I love the fact that he was very clear with his messaging. I think that that is going to go a long way as, you know, he continues to really develop this young roster and everything else. And so I thought it was a success to have Tiago Splitter out there for those first 2 games, even though it was in a losing effort. And so the next thing that went well for the Chicago Bulls is going to be with what happened with Caleb Wilson. Look, Caleb Wilson was just everything and more for us as Chicago Bulls fans. I mean, I think that we leave the NBA Summer League super excited, and you just have to wonder what it's going to look like now that he's going to be with Modest Bazelis, the type of work ethic that Modest Bazelis has. And I think that many people are maybe even forgetting that Modest Bazelis could be in line for a big jump in this 3rd season. And then Josh Giddey, with the way that he played over the last couple seasons with the Chicago Bulls, it's all going to be about him just staying healthy and then just continuing to grow here. And so, look, this is very exciting to see what Caleb Wilson is going to do now paired with the rest of this roster. I think we got a chance to see what the motor was like, right? It's very real on both sides of the basketball. This is a guy that showed us the scoring, right? So he showed us the ability to knock down 3-point shots. He showed us the ability to get to the rim. I love the block shots. I loved hearing him mic'd up and everything else in the huddle. And I think that the one thing that he did struggle with was the free throw shooting, but still, you know, I think that that's something that he's going to lock in on. You know, he went went 4 of 12. And then also, too, he had 5.2 turnovers per game. But still, the numbers were great, man. 23.5 points per game, 7.2 rebounds per game, 2.5 blocks per game. He also had 1.2 with the steals in 27 minutes and just being able to knock down threes as well. And so that was something that was really a question mark for Caleb Wilson. And so, I think we saw everything that we wanted from Caleb Wilson, which shows us that, look, man, he is going to be a very good basketball player for the Chicago Bulls. And so can't wait to see that. And so I think that that is also, too, another positive here for us. And then next, I think another thing that is certainly a positive for us is what we saw, with the two-way players for the Chicago Bulls. I think that with what we saw with Jaylin Sellers, what we saw with Donovan Atwell, and then also, too, with Tobe Awaka, like, I think that all those players were terrific for the Chicago Bulls. I talked about the fact that with Tobe Awaka, I felt like that he got better as time went along. I thought that Jaylin Sellers, another guy that when you listen to him mic'd up, you could feel the energy. I thought that he had a ton of effort plays on the defensive end. And I love the fact that that's what his goal was. He wanted to shut off the other players' water. So he said that a couple times. He said that going into the NBA Summer League, and he also said that during the game, too, during an interview. And so I thought that he was locked in. I loved how he went at Cameron Carr, kind of got him going. I think that that's what got Cameron Carr going. But I like the fact that he was unafraid of that. And with Donovan Atwell, look, I know, exclusively he was a three-point shooter, but I just loved his off-ball movement. And I think defensively, he should have got a little bit more credit because it wasn't just the, I guess, point of attack defense that I saw from Donovan Atwell, but it was just knowing where to be as a team defender. And I talked about, an assignment that Noa Essengue messed up on where he was the low man on the defense. And so I didn't necessarily see that with Donovan Atwell. I thought that his reads and stuff like that off the ball were good. And I think that, yes, he can improve as a defender, but I think that, look, certainly you would have to consider him, being in the mix maybe for that last roster spot. I mean, we'll see what happens when it comes down to training camp, but I think that all these players were a hit for the Chicago Bulls. And so I think that that really speaks to what Bryson Graham was able to do, by going out and signing Tobe Awaka and Jaylin Sellers and then getting Donovan Atwell on the Exhibit 10 contract. And so I think that that was a hit there for the Chicago Bulls. And so, look, I think that those were probably the things that you look at this and you say, okay, that was a positive. I will also, too, throw out there as well that I thought that Kennedy Chandler, I thought that he competed well. This is a guy that was on a couple 10-day contracts with the Utah Jazz. And so let's see if they continue on with him. But I certainly think that he should be on the Windy City Bulls. And we talked about the importance of the development process for the Chicago Bulls within. And so, again, Bryson Graham off to a good start there. Now, as far as the things that just were downside and things that just really needed to get better, which is going to go into the overall grade, which we're going to get to here in a moment. You just take a look at just the roster construction, for this. I think that, we probably would have got a better chance to see exactly maybe what Dailyn Swain could be if there was a true point guard on the roster. But again, this is the NBA Summer League, right? Like, you're just throwing players together out there. And so you can't necessarily worry about the roster construction. But I would say, kind of going back, you would probably want to throw another point guard out there, true point guard, and see, kind of what you can get out of Dailyn Swain operating exclusively off the wing like that, being a little bit more comfortable. And same with Caleb Wilson as well, having him play with, maybe somebody that can get him lobs and stuff like that, because I think that that's really realistically what he's going to see when the NBA season starts. And so I would say that that was probably a downside with the roster construction, but I don't think that that was too big. Next, I think another thing that clearly, was on the downside for the Chicago Bulls was what happened to Dailyn Swain. And so with Dailyn Swain, Dailyn Swain struggled, right? I think it's very clear that we talked about this with Dailyn Swain and the struggles here. And so he averaged 4.3 points per game, 5 rebounds a game, 2.3 assists, and 28 minutes per game. And then also, too, he shot 4 of 31 from the field for 12.9 39%. And so just couldn't knock down a 3-point shot, really struggled from the field. Never got a chance to really get comfortable as a driver, even though he did have a highlight in the Lakers game where he was able to put a defender on his back and get to the dunk. And so he did show the athleticism and the ability, but it just really didn't click for him in NBA Summer League. I think that it was rough putting him out there as a point guard. You could just tell in that first game, like he just was overthinking it a bit. And so I talked about that. And he does talk about that some more if you want to go and take a look at this quote that we're going to take a look at. But this was on Hoops Rumor. And this was just about a day ago, just talking about some of the notes around the Chicago Bulls Summer League. But this is what he had to say in regards to just his performance. And so he's talking to Joel Lorenzi of The Athletic. And so this is what he has to say here in regards to just really what he was going through there. So he says that I think it's really easy to notice when I'm in my own head and kind of putting pressure on myself. I just try to stick with what I know that works. That's what he told The Athletic there. He said, obviously, having a routine is not going to save you every game. You're going to have bad games, but I just try to stick to what I know and not get too discouraged and not feed into what people are saying in the media and stuff like that. All my teammates have been nothing but encouraging. And so you love to hear that. The fact that, look, he knows exactly where he is at this point in time. The fact that the teammates that he has around him have truthfully embraced him. I especially, just remember what Jaylin Sellers had to say about him and his belief in him. And so, look, I think he's going to be fine. I think that he just needs to lock in here for the upcoming training camp and then get out there in the preseason and just hoop. I think that that's really what it comes down for Dailyn Swain, is he's just got to go out there and hoop. And so I think that that was certainly one of the downsides here. But again, it's NBA Summer League, and so we'll see what happens. He's got a lot of time to go so early on in his career. The next, I think another thing that was kind of a bit on the downside here was with Noa Essengue. And so I thought that Noa Essengue, he showed some flashes defensively for sure. I liked at times he showed some length out there. I think at times, like you could see, he could be disruptive on the defensive end, but you could just tell offensively, just really trying to find himself there. His shooting form and everything, it looks good. It just didn't necessarily go down as much as you wanted it to. And then also, too, there's the question around just the energy level, right? But I don't think that that's necessarily the biggest deal with Noa Essengue, because I'm not sure that he's the type of guy that, just giving you an example, that he's going to dunk on you and then, start yelling and stuff like that. Like, I don't know if you necessarily see that. I think he's the guy that he just needs to go out there and he needs to hoop. And so I think his energy level was questioned out there. And so we'll see what happens with Noa Essengue moving forward, but very much needs to adjust, I think, to the physicality and just really find his game. And so I'd say that that was probably another downside there, but that's what you want in the NBA Summer League. You want players to go out there, just get some reps and go from there, because look, he could have, just kind of an up and down summer league and then go into training camp and preseason and really take off from there. And so we'll see what happens with Noa Essengue. And so now that brings me to the final part and just really where we're at, I think, with the grade here for the Chicago Bulls. And so overall, I'm giving this a B-. I think that this was certainly above an average performance for the Chicago Bulls collectively. And again, I'm talking about not just what we saw on the court, but collectively, from the front office to coaching, and then also too with what the players did as well. You have to give, I think, the development coaches a lot of credit too as well. I thought that they went out there and they coached, up some good games and things like that, even if it didn't result in the wins that you wanted. The fact that they were very engaged and locked in as well. And so you love to see that, because the player development coaches from last season obviously are still here with the Chicago Bulls. And so you want to see that for a team that is really in this rebuild phase and really starting off early. You need to have that with your development team. And so I thought that that was good to see for the Chicago Bulls. And so again, giving them a B-. I think that, had we maybe saw some solid performances, I think from maybe Noa Essengue or a Daiyln Swain here, I think that that easily could have been right there at maybe an A- for me if that would have happened. But anyway, you guys let me know in the comments what you guys are thinking. I'm giving the Bulls a B- overall for their summer league grade. You guys let me know if you feel like it should have been a little bit higher here. And again, I think that the Bulls are off to a great start. You got just really this young core with Caleb Wilson off to a good one. I think that Tiago Splitter is well off to a good one. And so we'll see what happens with the Chicago Bulls. And look, as we always say, go Bulls. And I will see you guys on the next one. All right. Peace.